The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when Tom Gallagher, a seasoned rancher in the heart of the Wild West, stepped out of his small, weather-worn cabin. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of sagebrush and dust. Tom had lived on this land for nearly 40 years, and every inch of it was familiar. The rolling plains, the dry creek bed, the windmill that creaked as it turned lazily in the morning breeze. Today, however, felt different. There was a tension in the air, a quiet heaviness that made him pause at the edge of his porch. Tom's ranch had always been a place of routine. He rose early, fed the horses, checked the fences, and made sure the cattle were in good shape. Life on the ranch was predictable, but it was the life he loved. The isolation suited him. Most days, the only voices he heard were the soft snorts of his horses, the lowing of the cows, or the occasional call of a hawk overhead. He liked it that way. But today the wind seemed sharper, the shadows longer, and even the birds seemed quieter than usual. He mounted his horse, Rust, a sturdy bay mare who had been with him for over a decade. Together they moved across the familiar terrain, Tom scanning the horizon for anything unusual. The cattle had been restless in the last few days, and he had a feeling that something was out of place. Ranching taught a man to notice the smallest changes: tracks in the mud, the way the wind shifted, the smell of smoke in the distance. And today, Tom noticed them all. As he approached the northern edge of the property, where the terrain sloped down into a narrow ravine, he caught sight of movement near the creek. At first he thought it might be one of the deer that often wandered through at dawn, but the shape was wrong, larger, more awkward. Curiosity and concern pushed him forward. He guided Rust carefully along the worn path, slowing when the ground became uneven. The last thing a man wanted was to have his horse stumble while he was investigating something unknown. And then he saw it. A young calf, no more than a few weeks old, had gotten its leg caught in an old rusted trap. Tom's heart sank. He had seen injuries before, broken legs, illness, but traps were something different. They weren't supposed to be on his land. His ranch was a place of honesty and hard work, not cruelty. The metal jaws of the trap clamped tightly around the calf's leg, and it struggled in vain, its tiny hooves scraping against the dirt. Each movement seemed to make the trap bite even harder. Don't pull it away," a voice seemed to whisper in his mind. It wasn't really there, of course, but it captured the fear he felt. He froze in shock, holding Rust back as he watched the calf tremble. He could almost hear its pain, the helplessness in its eyes, and for a moment he felt paralyzed. What if he acted too quickly? What if he hurt the calf even more? Tom had dealt with emergencies before, but never anything like this. His hands shook slightly as he reached for the leather strap he always carried for such occasions. He knew he had to act, yet the instinct to hesitate, the part of him that respected life and feared causing harm, was almost stronger than his courage. Rust shifted nervously beneath him, snorting as if urging him to move. The rancher took a deep breath, letting the calm he usually felt in the open plains wash over him. He needed a plan. The first step was to assess the trap. The metal was old and heavy, with jagged edges that had dug deep into the calf's soft skin. Blood had begun to seep from the wound, and every minute counted. Tom had to be methodical. Panicking would only make things worse. He dismounted slowly, speaking softly to Rust as he tied her to a nearby post. Horses understood more than people thought. They could sense fear, and Rust was already uneasy. Crouching beside the calf, Tom spoke in low, gentle tones. "Easy now, little one. I'm here. You're going to be okay." The calf flinched at his touch but didn't pull away, as if it sensed his intentions. Tom examined the trap carefully, noting the rusted bolt that held the jaws closed and the tension of the spring. He had tools in his saddlebag, but none were designed for this exact situation. Improvisation would be necessary, and the wrong move could cost the calf its leg, or worse, its life. He thought back to the stories his father had told him about the old days on the ranch, about handling emergencies with whatever you had on hand. A knife could loosen the bolt, a piece of rope could secure the leg once freed, and sheer patience would see them through. Tom's mind raced as he pulled the tools from his bag, weighing each option, calculating each move.
Every second mattered, and yet he could feel time stretching, dragging out each heartbeat in slow motion. The calf whimpered, small and terrified, and Tom felt a pang of empathy.
It reminded him of the helplessness he had felt as a boy when his younger sister fell from a horse. or the nights he had spent watching over sick livestock, praying they would survive until morning. He steadied his hands, letting his experience guide him. The first step was to loosen the trap without causing more injury. Carefully, he wedged a flat piece of metal beneath the jaws, levering gently. The trap resisted, creaking under pressure, but slowly it began to loosen. Then, just as the metal gave way slightly, the calf jerked. Tom froze in shock. If he pulled too hard now, the leg could snap. He took a step back, breathing deeply, speaking softly to the animal. Easy, just a little more. You're almost free. His hands moved with cautious precision, each motion deliberate. He adjusted the lever, eased the tension, and finally, slowly, carefully, the jaws of the trap released their hold. The calf stumbled but didn't fall. Relief washed over Tom in a wave, almost overwhelming him. He could see the small wound on its leg, red and raw, and knew it would need tending. But for now, the immediate danger was over. He gently examined the injury, cleaning the dirt and disinfecting the cut with water he had brought in a small canteen. Every touch was careful, deliberate as he wrapped the leg loosely with a cloth to prevent further damage. Once the calf was stable, Tom stepped back, exhausted but relieved. Rust nuzzled his shoulder as if sensing the tension had broken. The rancher allowed himself a small smile. Life on the ranch was unpredictable, yes, but it was also full of moments like this. Moments that tested courage, patience, and heart. Today he had acted when it mattered most, and the reward was small but meaningful. A life saved. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the plains, Tom led the calf back toward the corral, each step deliberate, careful. He couldn't help but wonder how the trap had come to be there. Whoever had set it was long gone, leaving destruction in their wake, but Tom knew that dwelling on it would not help. The task at hand was to ensure the calf's survival, and as he guided it along, he whispered softly to himself, almost in disbelief, Don't pull it away." But we did it. We got through. By the time he returned to the cabin, the ranch was alive again with its usual sounds. The lowing of cattle, the creaking of the windmill, and the soft rustle of the wind through the grass. Tom paused on the porch, looking out across the land he had tended for decades. Today had reminded him that life was fragile, and yet with care, determination, and a steady hand, even the most difficult moments could be overcome. And deep down, he knew that this was only the beginning. The land had its secrets, and the Wild West was full of surprises, some terrifying, some inspiring. But for now, the rancher allowed himself a quiet moment of triumph, a silent acknowledgement that courage sometimes came in the form of small, deliberate actions, and that life, no matter how harsh, could always be preserved with patience, skill, and heart. The afternoon sun was beginning its slow descent behind the distant hills when Tom Gallagher finally returned to his cabin with the calf safely in tow. The little animal, still wobbly on its injured leg, seemed to sense that it was now in safe hands. Tom's face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but his eyes held a quiet satisfaction. He knew the day had tested him, but it had also reminded him why he loved the life he led. The Wild West was harsh and unforgiving, yet it rewarded those who paid attention, worked hard, and acted with care. Tom settled the calf into a small pen near the barn, which he had quickly cleaned and prepared for emergencies. Straw littered the ground to provide comfort, and a bucket of fresh water stood ready. He knelt beside the young creature, gently inspecting the makeshift bandage he had wrapped around its leg. The wound looked bad, but it was not beyond healing. With patience and attention, he could nurse the calf back to full strength. The thought brought him a small measure of hope. As he worked, Tom's mind wandered to the trap he had discovered earlier. It was old, rusted, and cruelly effective, and yet it was out of place on his property. He had fenced the land carefully, and he had been meticulous about marking dangerous areas. Someone had been here before him, someone who didn't care about life, and the thought unsettled him. He glanced around the ranch, eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of intruders, but the landscape remained calm, bathed in golden light. Still, a nagging unease lingered in the back of his mind. Tom pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the immediate needs of the calf. He gathered a bundle of soft straw and arranged it gently around the injured leg. He spoke softly, soothing the animal with low, gentle words. "Easy now. Don't be afraid. You're safe here." The calf nuzzled his hand as if responding to the kindness it had felt in a moment of terror. Tom smiled. feeling a connection with the creature he had saved. Life on the ranch was often lonely, but it also allowed for moments of quiet understanding between man and animal. After tending to the calf, Tom turned his attention to the barn. He checked each pen, each fence, each stall, making sure that all his livestock were safe and accounted for. It was routine work, but today it carried extra meaning. The events of the morning had reminded him how quickly danger could appear, and how important it was to remain vigilant. He had grown up with stories of wild animals, rustlers, and accidents, and each tale had prepared him for moments like this. Now, years later, those lessons were proving invaluable. As he worked, the wind picked up, rustling the grass and carrying the scent of distant pine. Tom paused, listening carefully. In the back of his mind, he wondered if the trap had been set by accident, or if someone had come onto his land with intent. It was impossible to tell, and speculation alone would not help. Still, he made a mental note to check the northern boundary more thoroughly in the coming days. Safety was a priority, and he could not afford to leave anything to chance. By evening, Tom had finished his rounds, and the ranch was quiet once more. He sat on the porch, Rust grazing nearby, the calf safe in its pen. The sky turned shades of orange and pink as the sun sank lower, and for a moment the world felt still. Tom allowed himself to breathe, to relax after the tension of the day. Yet beneath the calm, a sense of anticipation lingered. He knew that the Wild West was never truly calm for long. That night, Tom prepared a simple dinner of beans and bread over a small stove. The cabin was modest with only the necessities, but it was comfortable and safe. He ate slowly, savoring the quiet, reflecting on the events of the day. Saving the calf had required courage, careful thought, and patience. He had acted quickly when it mattered most, and that action had made all the difference. Yet the memory of the calf trapped in the cruel jaws of the old device lingered in his mind, a reminder of how fragile life could be. After dinner, Tom went outside to check on the calf one more time. The little animal was resting quietly, its breathing steady, and Tom felt a surge of relief. He patted its head gently, whispering words of reassurance. "You'll be strong soon. You just rest now." As he stood there, he looked up at the stars beginning to twinkle in the clear night sky. The vast expanse of the plain stretched out before him, dark and quiet, filled with the soft sounds of the evening. It was a beautiful yet untamed world, one that demanded respect and care. Sleep came slowly for Tom that night. He lay in his bedroll, listening to the wind through the cracks in the cabin walls, thinking about the morning and the challenges yet to come. The trap had been an unexpected danger, but it had also reminded him of the importance of preparedness and attentiveness. Tomorrow he would inspect the property more thoroughly, ensuring that no other hidden dangers threatened his livestock. The thought comforted him, providing a sense of control in an unpredictable world. Morning arrived with a gentle chill. Tom awoke before dawn, as was his habit, and immediately went outside to check on the calf. The young creature was stirring, its eyes bright and curious despite the lingering discomfort in its leg. Tom smiled, pleased to see it alert and responsive. He prepared a small breakfast of oats and water for the calf, speaking softly as it ate. The bond between them was growing stronger, and Tom felt a quiet sense of purpose in caring for this life. Once the calf was fed, Tom saddled Rust and began a careful patrol of the northern boundary of the ranch. He moved slowly, eyes scanning every detail, the worn fence posts, the uneven ground, any signs of disturbance. The trap from yesterday was still fresh in his mind, and he was determined to prevent any further incidents. As he rode, he noticed tracks leading toward the ravine. They were faint but unmistakable, footprints that did not belong to his cattle or horses. Someone had been there recently. A sense of tension settled over him. He had always known the Wild West was unpredictable, but now the threat was personal. Someone had intruded on his land, set a trap, and left it behind. Tom's hand instinctively went to the small knife at his belt. He would not act rashly, but he needed to be ready. His years on the ranch had taught him the value of patience and observation, and he relied on those lessons now. As the day wore on, Tom continued his careful inspection. He marked areas that needed repair, checked each fence line, and ensured that the livestock were safe. The calf followed him as best it could, its small steps careful around its injured leg. Tom spoke to it gently, offering encouragement and reassurance. There was a quiet rhythm to the work, a balance between tension and routine. that reminded him why he had chosen this life. By late afternoon, the sun was high and bright again, and Tom returned to the cabin exhausted but satisfied. The calf was resting comfortably, the fences were secure, and the property had been thoroughly inspected. Yet, the footprints in the northern ravine remained in his mind, a silent warning that not all threats were immediately visible. Tom knew he would need to stay vigilant. The Wild West was a land of surprises, and he had learned that survival depended on attention, courage, and quick thinking. That evening, as he sat on the porch watching the sunset, Tom reflected on the events of the past 2 days. Saving the calf had been a test of skill and resolve, and he had passed. But he knew the challenge was far from over. Life on the ranch was full of unexpected trials, and he had to be ready for whatever came next. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the faint scent of sagebrush and dust, and Tom felt a quiet determination settle in his chest. He would face whatever the land had to offer, and he would protect his animals and his home with every ounce of strength he possessed. As night fell, Tom prepared the calf's pen with fresh straw and water, ensuring it was comfortable for the night. Rust was stabled nearby, and the rest of the livestock were safe and secure. The stars glittered overhead, a vast and unchanging reminder of the world beyond the ranch. Tom lay in his bedroll once more, reflecting on the lessons of the past 2 days. That courage, patience, and careful action could make a difference, and that even in the harshest of lands, life could be preserved through care and attention. And deep down, he knew that the events of these days were only the beginning. The land held its secrets, and the Wild West was full of challenges yet to come. But for now, he allowed himself a quiet moment of triumph, a sense of accomplishment in a world where both danger and beauty existed side by side. The next morning, the ranch awoke to the soft glow of dawn, and Tom Gallagher moved quietly through the cabin, careful not to disturb the sleeping calf in its pen. The young animal had rested well overnight, and Tom's heart lifted at the sight of it stretching awkwardly, its small leg beginning to show signs of strength. Life on the ranch was never easy, but moments like this reminded him why he endured the long days and harsh nights. There was a rhythm to the land, a quiet pulse that connected man and nature, and Tom had learned to listen to it. After a simple breakfast of bread and coffee, Tom saddled Rust and prepared for a thorough inspection of the property. Yesterday's discovery of the trap had left him uneasy, and he was determined to ensure that no other hidden dangers threatened his livestock. The northern boundary, in particular, had been the source of concern, and he wanted to trace every step, every footprint until he was certain the ranch was secure. As he rode, the landscape stretched out in familiar patterns. The rolling plains, the clusters of scrub, the occasional clump of trees that marked the edges of the ravine. Yet despite the familiarity, Tom's senses were heightened. Every sound, every movement caught his attention. The rustle of grass, the distant call of a hawk, the soft thud of his own horse's hooves against the earth. He scanned the ground carefully, noting tracks in the dirt, signs of disturbed vegetation, and small clues that others might have overlooked. Near the edge of the ravine, Tom spotted the footprints again. They were faint, partially obscured by the morning wind, but unmistakable. Someone or something had been here recently. His pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had faced threats before, from wild animals to harsh weather, and he knew the value of patience and observation. Acting rashly could make a dangerous situation worse. He dismounted Rust and examined the tracks closely. They were human footprints, small but deliberate, and they led deeper into the ravine. Tom's mind raced. Why would anyone come onto his land and set a trap? Was it carelessness, mischief, or something more sinister? He could not be sure, but he knew he had to find out. The safety of his livestock, and now the young calf, depended on it. Tom decided to follow the footprints carefully, moving slowly to avoid alerting anyone who might still be nearby. The ravine was narrow and winding, with steep sides and thick underbrush in places. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting shifting shadows that made it difficult to see clearly. Rust grazed nearby, tied to a sturdy tree, and Tom kept one hand near the knife at his belt, ready for any sudden danger. The Wild West was unpredictable, and even the calmest landscape could hide threats. As he followed the trail, Tom's mind recalled the stories his father had told him about the dangers of the land. Rustlers, trappers, and dishonest travelers often left hazards behind, and the lessons he had learned as a boy were now proving essential. He paused frequently, listening carefully, noting every sound: the distant trickle of water in the creek, the rustle of leaves, the faint crunch of footsteps that were not his own. His senses were sharp, honed by decades of living closely with the land. Suddenly he saw something that made him freeze. A small pile of broken wood and metal lay in the grass, remnants of another trap, partially hidden under a clump of brush. Tom's jaw tightened. This was not an accident. Someone had come onto his land deliberately, setting dangerous traps to harm his animals or possibly to intimidate him. The realization filled him with a mix of anger and resolve. He could not allow this to continue. Tom carefully approached the pile, examining it without disturbing the ground too much. The craftsmanship of the trap was crude but effective, and it had been designed to catch a calf or small animal. He took note of its construction, storing the memory in his mind for later, when he would reinforce his fences and ensure no other device could harm his livestock. For now, he needed to continue following the footprints to understand how far the intruder had gone. The trail led him deeper into the ravine, and the terrain became more challenging. Loose rocks and uneven soil made every step careful and deliberate. Sunlight was dappled through the trees, and the quiet of the morning seemed almost eerie in contrast to the tension building within him. Tom's heart beat steadily, but he was acutely aware of every sound and movement. In the Wild West, a single mistake could cost dearly. As he moved, he noticed signs of other wildlife: rabbit tracks, bird feathers, and the occasional broken branch from a deer passing through. But all of these natural signs were easily distinguishable from the human footprints he tracked. He followed them cautiously, the trail leading toward a small clearing where the sunlight shone brightly on the grass. There he found more evidence of the intruder: a discarded piece of cloth and a small leather pouch. Clearly, the person had been here, and recently. Tom's instincts told him to be patient. He did not rush into confrontation, for he had learned that careful observation and preparation were often more effective than immediate action. He examined the area thoroughly, noting the direction of the tracks and estimating how long ago they had been made. It was clear the intruder had moved through quickly, perhaps in a hurry, leaving only these few traces behind. But the presence of multiple traps indicated a level of planning and intent that made Tom wary. He returned to Rust and mounted carefully, scanning the horizon as he rode back toward the ranch. He needed to secure the area and reinforce the fences, ensuring no further traps could be set. The young calf was still vulnerable, and he could not risk another accident. His thoughts also turned to the broader question: who had come onto his land and why? The Wild West was full of unpredictable people, but someone targeting his property was a serious concern. Back at the cabin, Tom set to work reinforcing the fences along the northern boundary. He replaced old posts, tightened loose wires, and added extra supports where the ground was soft. Each nail he hammered and each wire he tightened was a measure of protection, a way to safeguard his animals and his livelihood. The sun was high overhead and sweat ran down his face, but he worked tirelessly, driven by the knowledge that vigilance could prevent tragedy. By late afternoon, the work was nearly complete, and Tom finally allowed himself a moment of rest. The calf was grazing carefully in a small fenced area, its injured leg supported but slowly regaining strength. Rust stood nearby, ever watchful. Tom took a deep breath, feeling a sense of accomplishment tempered by the awareness that danger had come closer than it should have. He would need to remain alert, but for now he had made progress. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, Tom's thoughts returned to the traps and the footprints. Whoever had intruded on his property had planned this carefully. It was not a random accident, but a deliberate act. The thought unsettled him, yet it also strengthened his resolve. He had faced challenges before and had always found a way through. The Wild West demanded courage, patience, and quick thinking, and Tom was determined to meet the challenge. That evening, he prepared the calf's pen with fresh straw and water, ensuring it was safe and comfortable for the night. Rust was stabled nearby, and the rest of the livestock were secure. Tom sat on the porch, gazing at the stars beginning to appear in the night sky. The vast expanse of the plains stretched out before him, filled with quiet sounds and subtle movements. It was a world of beauty and danger, a world that required constant attention and respect. Sleep came slowly, as Tom's mind reviewed the day's events. He knew that tomorrow would bring more work, more vigilance, and perhaps more surprises. The intruder had left evidence of their presence, and Tom could not ignore it. Yet he also knew that preparation and observation were powerful tools. With careful planning, he could protect his land, his animals, and the young calf he had saved. The Wild West was unpredictable, but he had learned to meet unpredictability with calm, careful action. As he lay in his bedroll, he reflected on the lessons of the past few days, that danger could appear suddenly, that life was fragile, and that courage often meant acting with care and patience. The calf had reminded him of the importance of vigilance and compassion, and the intruder had reminded him that the world could be harsh and unfair. Yet in the midst of all this, Tom felt a quiet determination. He would continue to watch, to protect, and to act when necessary. And as the night deepened, with the wind whispering through the trees and the stars shining brightly overhead, Tom Gallagher knew that the challenges he faced were far from over. The land held its secrets, the Wild West held its dangers, and he would need all his skill, courage, and experience to face what lay ahead. But for now, he allowed himself a quiet moment of satisfaction, knowing that he had acted wisely, protected life, and strengthened the safety of his ranch. The morning light crept slowly across the Wild West plains, casting a warm golden hue over Tom Gallagher's ranch. The events of the past days weighed heavily on his mind. Though the calf was recovering and the fences had been reinforced, there was a lingering tension in the air. The discovery of multiple traps and footprints had reminded him that someone had intruded on his property, and the thought unsettled him. Tom knew that the Wild West was unpredictable, but he also knew that preparation and vigilance could make all the difference between safety and disaster. He began his morning as always, moving quietly through the cabin to check on the calf. The young animal was awake and alert, standing carefully on its injured leg. Tom smiled, relieved to see it stable and responsive. Life on the ranch was a cycle of small victories like this, moments that reminded him why he persevered in a place where danger was never far away. He prepared a small breakfast of oats and water, speaking softly to the calf as it ate. "You're getting stronger every day. Keep steady now," he whispered. The calf nuzzled his hand, a small gesture that brought him comfort. After tending to the calf, Tom saddled Rust and prepared for another inspection of the property. He had been thinking about the traps and footprints from the northern ravine. Whoever had left them had not only planned carefully but also seemed determined. Tom's experience had taught him that people who set traps rarely acted out of kindness. His mind raced with possibilities. Was it a prank, a test, or something more serious? He could not afford to guess. He needed to be alert and methodical. The ride to the northern edge of the property was quiet, save for the sound of Rust's hooves and the whisper of the wind through the tall grass. Tom scanned the horizon, noting every detail: the slope of the hills, the clusters of scrub, the faint movement of distant wildlife. His senses were sharp, honed over decades of living closely with the land. He knew that a moment's distraction could lead to missed signs or hidden dangers. As he approached the ravine, he noticed small changes in the terrain, subtle disturbances that indicated someone had passed through recently. Tom dismounted carefully and examined the ground. The footprints were fresh, and the presence of a second trap partially hidden in the brush confirmed his growing suspicion. Someone had returned. The realization sent a shiver down his spine. The intruder was not done, and the potential danger was escalating. Tom's hands tightened around his tools, and he moved cautiously, aware that the intruder could be nearby. The ravine was narrow, with steep sides and patches of loose rock. Tom advanced slowly, mindful of every step. He examined each footprint, comparing sizes and spacing, trying to understand the intruder's movements. There was a method to the placement of the traps, each one positioned to capture an animal or surprise an unsuspecting person. Tom's mind worked quickly, devising ways to dismantle them safely and prevent further harm. Patience and careful observation were key. As he carefully approached the second trap, Tom noticed something unusual. Near the base of a small tree, partially hidden under leaves and dirt, lay a small note, roughly folded and weathered by the elements. He picked it up carefully, reading the words scribbled in hurried handwriting. It was not threatening in tone, but it hinted at a presence that was aware of his routines, someone who had observed the ranch closely. Tom's jaw tightened. Whoever this was, they knew the land well enough to move undetected and leave traps strategically. He spent the next few hours dismantling the traps, carefully examining each one to understand its construction. The process was meticulous, requiring focus and steady hands. One wrong move could have injured the intruder or himself, and he could not afford mistakes. As he worked, he reflected on the resilience required to live in the Wild West. Danger could appear at any moment, yet survival depended on patience, intelligence, and the ability to act decisively when necessary. By midday, the area was cleared, and Tom had reinforced the fences and added warning markers near the locations of the previous traps. He returned to Rust, feeling a mix of relief and lingering unease. The intruder's presence was now undeniable, and Tom knew that further precautions were necessary. He could not rely solely on fences and barriers. He needed to be alert, ready to respond to any unexpected challenge. Back at the ranch, Tom inspected the other livestock, ensuring that they were safe and secure. The calf, now more confident on its leg, grazed cautiously in the enclosed area. Tom spoke to it gently, offering reassurance and encouragement. "You're doing well. Just keep steady," he said. Each step the young animal took was a small victory, a sign that patience and care could overcome adversity. The bond between man and animal deepened with each passing day. As the afternoon sun began to dip, Tom decided to prepare a plan for the coming days. He needed to anticipate the intruder's movements, reinforce vulnerable areas, and ensure that his livestock and property were fully protected. He sketched a rough map of the ranch in his mind, noting weak spots, previous trap locations, and potential hiding places. The Wild West was a land of constant vigilance, and Tom's experience had taught him that preparation was often the difference between safety and danger. While checking the northern boundary one last time before returning to the cabin, Tom noticed a faint trail leading toward the creek. Curiosity mixed with caution as he followed it, moving slowly and listening carefully. The trail led to a small clearing where the sunlight illuminated a cluster of disturbed grass. Someone had been here recently, and the signs were unmistakable. Tom paused, considering his options. He could investigate further, but he also needed to protect the ranch and ensure the calf's safety. Prudence and strategy were as important as courage. Returning to the cabin, Tom reflected on the day's events. The intruder's repeated presence indicated that this was more than a random occurrence. Someone was deliberately testing his vigilance, leaving signs of their presence and observing his routines. It was a challenge, but Tom did not feel fear. Instead, he felt a quiet determination, a resolve to meet the challenge head-on. He would act carefully but decisively, and he would protect his land, his animals, and the young calf he had saved. That evening, he prepared the calf's pen with fresh straw and water, ensuring that it was comfortable for the night. Rust was stabled nearby, and the rest of the livestock were secure. Tom sat on the porch, gazing at the stars beginning to appear in the night sky. The vast plain stretched out before him, quiet and full of hidden possibilities. He reflected on the lessons of the past days. Vigilance, patience, and courage were essential for survival in a land that was beautiful, unforgiving, and unpredictable. Sleep came slowly. Tom lay in his bedroll, listening to the sounds of the night, the wind rustling through the grass, the distant call of an owl, the soft movement of wildlife. The Wild West was full of surprises, and he knew that tomorrow might bring further challenges. Yet he also knew that preparation, careful observation, and decisive action could make a difference. The events of the past days had tested his skills and resolve, and he had risen to the occasion. Deep down, Tom knew that the intruder's presence was a warning that the days ahead would require even greater vigilance. The land held its secrets, and the Wild West offered both beauty and danger. But Tom Gallagher, seasoned rancher and careful observer of life's rhythms, was ready to face whatever came next. He had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act wisely despite it. And as he drifted into sleep, he felt a quiet confidence that he could meet the challenges ahead, protect his ranch and safeguard the young life he had saved. The morning air was crisp and still, and Tom Gallagher rose before dawn as he always did. Over the past days, the presence of the intruder had weighed heavily on his mind. He had tended to the calf, reinforced fences, and carefully inspected every corner of the ranch, but the sense of unease remained. Today, he told himself, would be different. Today he would uncover the truth behind the traps and the hidden visitor. He needed to protect his ranch, his animals, and his own peace of mind. After a simple breakfast, he saddled Rust and led the young calf, now steadier on its leg, toward the northern ravine. The morning sunlight filtered through the trees, illuminating the faint tracks and disturbed grass he had noticed before. Tom's eyes scanned the area carefully, noting every detail, the broken twigs, the footprints, and the marks left by the traps. Patience and observation had guided him this far, and now he relied on them more than ever. As he moved deeper into the ravine, he heard a faint rustle. His heart skipped a beat, but he remained calm. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of footsteps over the dry leaves. He crouched behind a large boulder, watching silently. Through the morning haze, he saw a figure moving cautiously among the trees. It was a young man, unfamiliar to Tom, carrying tools and what appeared to be more traps. The intruder was careful, but not cautious enough to remain completely unseen. Tom's mind raced. The intruder's intent was now clear. He had been coming to the ranch deliberately, setting traps and testing boundaries. But why? Tom had seen enough of the world to know that some people acted out of mischief, others out of malice, and still others simply to challenge themselves. Whatever the reason, Tom knew that he could not allow this to continue. The safety of the calf and the rest of the livestock depended on action. He moved quietly, positioning himself downwind so his scent would not alert the young man. Every step was deliberate, careful, calculated. Tom had lived through harsh weather, wild animals, and unpredictable neighbors, and his experience had taught him the value of strategy over haste. He approached the intruder slowly, keeping the trees and rocks between them. Rust grazed quietly nearby, tied to a sturdy post while the calf stayed safely in its pen behind the main fence. The intruder paused, examining the ground, oblivious to the presence of the seasoned rancher nearby. Tom took a deep breath and stepped forward, speaking in a firm but calm voice. "Hey, you there! Stop!" The young man jumped, dropping the tools he carried, and spun around in surprise. His eyes widened when he saw Tom standing there, resolute and unafraid. "What are you doing on my property?" Tom demanded. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of authority and experience. The intruder hesitated, then stammered, clearly not expecting confrontation. I was just exploring. "I didn't mean any harm," he said, though the tools and traps at his feet told a different story. Tom studied the young man carefully. He could see the nervousness, the uncertainty, and perhaps even a hint of guilt. The intruder was inexperienced, unprepared for the consequences of his actions. Tom had faced people like this before, curious or reckless, testing boundaries without understanding the danger. "Curiosity is one thing," Tom said, his voice calm but firm. "Setting traps that can hurt animals or people is another. You've put more than yourself at risk." The young man's shoulders slumped and he nodded slowly. I didn't know it would hurt anyone. Or any animals," he admitted. Tom's eyes softened slightly, though he remained alert. "That's exactly why you need to understand responsibility," he said. "This land isn't just yours to explore. Every step, every action matters. Do you see the calf over there?" He gestured toward the young animal, now grazing carefully in its enclosure. "That calf could have been badly hurt, or worse, if you hadn't been careless." The intruder swallowed hard, his gaze shifting to the calf. I didn't mean to," he whispered. Tom's expression softened, but his tone remained firm. "Intentions matter, but so do results. You've learned a lesson the hard way today, but now you need to help fix what you've done, together." Tom guided the young man through the process of dismantling the remaining traps, explaining the dangers and demonstrating how even small mistakes could have serious consequences. The intruder listened intently, following Tom's instructions carefully. Each trap removed, each piece of metal or wire safely set aside, was a step toward responsibility. Tom spoke patiently, teaching not with anger but with authority and understanding. By the time the last trap was cleared, the young man had a newfound respect for the land, the animals, and the rancher's hard work. Once the work was complete, Tom addressed the young man directly. Now you understand why vigilance is important. You need to respect the land, the animals, and the people who live here. The Wild West doesn't forgive carelessness. The young man nodded, humbled by the experience. I understand, sir, he said quietly. I'll make sure it never happens again. Tom's gaze softened further. Good, learn from this. Let it teach you patience, responsibility, and care. With the intruder's presence no longer a threat, Tom turned his attention to the calf. The young animal had been through a lot over the past days, and now it was safe and secure. Tom approached it gently, speaking softly as he checked its leg once more. You've been brave, he said, and you're almost back to full strength. Keep steady, little one. The calf nuzzled him in response, a sign of trust and gratitude. It was a moment of quiet triumph, a reminder of why Tom had worked so tirelessly to protect his ranch and the lives within it. By the afternoon, the intruder had left the ranch carrying the lessons Tom had imparted. The young man walked away with a newfound understanding of respect, caution, and responsibility. Tom watched him disappear over the distant hills, feeling a sense of closure. The immediate threat had been resolved, and the ranch was safe once more. Yet Tom remained alert. He knew that life on the Wild West plains was unpredictable, and vigilance was a constant requirement. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the rolling plains, Tom returned to his cabin. He prepared the calf's pen for the night, ensuring fresh straw, water, and a safe, comfortable space. Rust stood nearby, calm and steady as always, a reliable companion through the challenges of the day. Tom sat on the porch, gazing at the horizon, reflecting on the past day's events. The land had tested him, the intruder had challenged him, and yet he had met each challenge with patience, courage, and wisdom. Night fell over the ranch, and the stars shone brightly in the clear sky. Tom felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that he had protected life, maintained the safety of his property, and taught an important lesson about responsibility and respect. The Wild West was a land of beauty, danger, and endless lessons, and he had faced it with skill, determination, and heart. In the following days, life returned to its familiar rhythm. The calf continued to grow stronger, taking steady steps across the grass. Tom maintained his routines, checking fences, tending to the livestock, and watching over his land with the same diligence that had kept it safe for decades. The incident with the intruder remained a reminder that vigilance was essential, but it also became a story of resilience, courage, and care, a story he would remember for the rest of his life. Tom Gallagher, seasoned rancher of the Wild West, had faced uncertainty, danger, and the unknown. Yet through careful observation, patient action, and unwavering determination, he had overcome each challenge. The traps were gone, the intruder had left with a valuable lesson, and the young calf thrived under his watchful care. The ranch, his home and sanctuary, was safe once more. As he watched the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold, Tom felt a quiet satisfaction. The land was peaceful, the animals were safe, and he had proven once again that courage, wisdom, and patience were the qualities that truly defined a rancher in the Wild West. And in that moment, he knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, he would meet them with the same calm determination that had guided him through the past days. The night was calm, the wind gentle, and the stars shining overhead. Tom sat on the porch, Rust at his side, the calf resting peacefully in its pen. The land was alive with the quiet sounds of nature, and Tom Gallagher, rancher, protector, and teacher, allowed himself a rare moment of reflection and pride. Life on the Wild West plains was unpredictable and often harsh, but it was also full of beauty, resilience, and triumphs born of courage and care. And tonight all was well.